Unfortunately, we have to move forward, or fortunately, because we are moving to Lithuanian case, which maybe was not so brilliant in communication techniques, but at least it produced some results. So, Nerijus, floor is yours.
Thank you. What do you mean by not yes? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. So my task here to present the, as it was mentioned already, the real case. The Lithuanian case was really the real planning exercise which we took during last 2 years. It was the national project which we have to implement, and the NICE PartiSEApate project was just a tool which we used to facilitate the process, to fill the gaps of the really communication and really talking to people, to sectors, talking to scientists, scientists to architects, architects to whatever, painters, and different kind of communication was involved. And this was not possible without such kind of initiative as a European funding projects or whatsoever. So. The case is real, and this is not a joke. I was thinking a lot how to present the Lithuanian MSP. We still call it MSP, even though I am fighting against it already 3 years. It's not the real MSP, it's something different. But in general, at the end, and especially after today's discussion, I realized that this is an MSP on certain scale, certain maybe strategical aim, certain type, at certain maybe kind of presentation of the planning process. So I'm really happy to introduce the real MSP of Lithuania. So you see here a very simplified, because I wanted to simplify a lot this presentation. We heard today a lot of philosophy, a lot of strategical thinking, a lot of political thinking, sector to sector, sector against sector, things like that. I wanted to present a result, meaning all those thoughts, all those talks have been somehow materialized in this particular case, which is the Lithuanian MSP. And here you can see the steps, or maybe not the steps, the actions which we should take in order to finalize it with a map showing the potential and the possibilities for the maritime development, our maritime activities development in our waters. Lithuania was and still is a small country, but by adding maritime space, we have extended our space for development, for ecological, for social, for economical reasons. So it's all just for sake of growth, for sake of the human wealth, as we believe. So we can see here the first, I will probably go a little bit further, because I wanted to mention that two first steps, which is actually stock taking of existing uses and strategical priorities, as well as the mapping of some assets which we have, I mean natural, cultural, and also natural and resources we have, was done by scientists or persons who knows the topic, right? This is experts who are doing the job. Rest, I mean identification of the trends, of strategies, of the demand, of the different conceptual solutions, of finding the way of ecological versus economical balancing, things like that. Then reserving some space for future needs, reserving some space for national strategical aims whatsoever. Those need to be done together. I mean, by consultation process, facilitating with a very active participation by all possible parties which you are able to involve, because you are not always able to involve everybody, because you sometimes do not know everybody, but sometimes those anybody do not want to talk to you. Sometimes it happens, so it's reality. So this is what I wanted to stress, and this all the bottom lines which has certain color. Those activities being facilitated actually by the PartiSEApate projects, and we are very happy about that. Where we are? We are in the Lithuanian Sea, so it's a small triangle, let's call it triangle, where we made a very simplified stock taking of the existing uses, meaning there is nothing scientific, it's just an actual situation where we can trace, map, track, and picturize or put it on the map everything what we know today. So fishing, well, fishing is not here, we know that because we fish everywhere, but the navigation routes, the ports, the anchorage sites, the military training zones, some resources, we know they are there, they are being used, and they are existing. Even maritime protection areas, they are also here as already designated. So the first step done, we know where we are, we know how our space looks like. Then the second step was the strategical investigation, meaning there are plenty of strategical documents available, plenty of ministries having their own interest in maritime space, not maybe even in maritime space, but in issues as such, because in Lithuania we used not to distinguish between land and sea, because sea is always was recognized as a recreational beach, nothing else. Its economy was somehow hidden in the ports, authorities, doors, whatever. So it's really not very much, not very intensive used area. So this process actually changes that a little bit. So we made a really nice report, I think, in the you already mentioned here before, BALTIC Plan project is again was a European funded activity which facilitated our job today. So we could investigate all possible, all existing and all possible strategical, let's say, needs, strategical aims of different ministries, different authorities, different institutions. So this was all mapped in some kind of document which helps them identifying the demands for maritime space in the future. Then we did some more interesting work. Here you can see the kind of example of how we mapped the assets. You heard today several times that scientific information or the data should be somehow translated into this manner, that the planners who are actually doing the real job, physical activity, they are not making any philosophy of it. They need ready-to-use data, information, or the applicable data sets. So what we done? We do not question the quality. We do not question the scale. We do not question the level of experts who have done some environmental investigations, who has been working for, I don't know, 20, 40, 50, 100 years by, I don't know, identifying the very valuable nursery grounds or whatever. We don't question that. We just simply take it as an indication that in those particular places that have been mapped somehow by somebody, they're mapped as a sensitive or important. Probably there is some truth down there, so we just take it into account and map those areas, just putting them one on another and identifying why those and where those most sensitive parts or most valuable then parts might be in our waters. So you can see here, for example, all what concerns the wintering birds. So we can somehow color it up, making kind of a concentration maps. And then when we do our further step of planning, we can take it into account as those areas or all those paths somehow could be used for the planning purpose, sometimes avoid maybe by some, I don't know, very strange technical infrastructure developments, but it is an information which planner can use because it's mapped. Then we have another interesting issue, it's energetical sources, which we also have mapped as a resource. This is again, if you want to know where are the proper places for the wind energy development, you have to know many things. First of all, of course, the wind speed, right? The wind character during the year. You have to know the depth or the morphology of the sea bottom, because it's a technical infrastructure. You need the proper depth, you need a proper geology, you need a proper ice conditions, wave conditions, stream conditions, whatsoever. There are many things which are scientific reports, which you cannot use if you are a simple planner who has no clue what does it mean, whatever, I don't know, 100 meters per second per year, per whatever. So you have to translate it into map. So one of the exercises, okay, we can do the mapping of the resources, we can do interpretation of very, I don't know, sophisticated geophysical data which shows where the potential oil fields might be. So we can do it, we can map it. So we as a scientist provide only with an informational layer which is of use, which is easy to use, which is easy to show, easy to then to apply for your planning purposes. Okay. Then, concept. We have to come up with a concept. We know the resources, we know the assets, we know somehow the ecological status or ecological value of our waters, and we know the demand for maritime users, we know the strategical aims of the country, of the European Union, of the Baltic Sea region. We know something today. We don't ask for more. We use the data which exists today. It's no sense of waiting another 10 years to know better, to know more, to know a better scale, to have a better quality. Makes no sense. We need to start from somewhere, so we started. We simply took our waters and we made a very simplified structure. I mean the background for our planning. So it's a natural pattern of the morphology of our waters, meaning there is a parts which are shallower than others. So we can say those areas which are lower or below the 50 meters isobath might be used for some technical infrastructure such as windmills, for example, or oil platforms, wave energy constructions, other things which I probably do not know all, but this is a concept, right? So we say those shallow water are suitable for that. We have the nearshore zone, which is always rich in biological life, which is most suitable, of course, for the port, for the nearshore boating, for the recreational fishery, for the even cultural stuff. I mean, the underwater heritage, recreational boating. A lot of things, which is very intensive, and this is always very sensitive from the biological perspective, from the biological point of view. So we say, okay, this area is best suited, or it is most important to have as a conservation area, to have an area for the port's development, and we have to deal with those two things, which are some kind prioritized for these particular areas. And again, we have something deeper, something more open, something less occupied, where we can say, okay, we have here all our navigation, for example, existing today. We have fishery existing today, so we don't spoil anything existing. So we're just simply creating new conditions, new opportunities for other users and for future users, and for the same traditional users as well, because they can somehow change their activities or make them better or make them more organized. So we say, okay, this area is suitable for those activities, and maybe so for something new, which we don't know today. So the future users, we don't exclude them from the mapping, from this exercise. So they are here. We have found a place which we can recognize today. We don't say this is correct, this is perfect or whatsoever, but today it looks like that. We have this type of concept established among planners group which have been involved in this process. Then, of course, this concept has to be approved, assessed, analyzed in very much detail. So we do the strategical assessment for the provided concept. So we put some economical developments into the conceptual map, showing what will happen, what are the results, and what is the assessment of those different type of activities which we put on the map, in order to provide with a final, let's say, common spatial concept, which is somehow or has to be accepted by all involved stakeholders, all involved parties, which takes care, who are interested in having this concept and who are interested in having organized maritime space. So we have the space organized according to our concept provided to you earlier on, with economical activities already feeded in. So we have existing users, we have new users, we have something we don't know. We have introduced here an activities which do not exist today. For example, if we talk about underwater cultural heritage, it's not actually existing as such in Lithuania, but by putting it into the concept, putting it into the legend in the key of the map, we say this is type of activity which is of relevance, and we have to prepare the grounds for that. We have to identify it, to mention it, and to have it later on maybe better developed. So okay, it's our task to put everything we know and to leave some space for this which we don't know yet. But it all should be somehow conceptually correctly be done. So this is our spatial concept, which followed then very, very intensive negotiations with all the political forces in Lithuania possible. And not only, because this map was also communicated beyond the Lithuania, so we have the consultations with the Latvian stakeholders, Russian stakeholders, Swedish in certain extent as well. So this kind of mapping or exercise, which is if not saying harmonized, but at least communicated to all parties, which has at least something to say about our planning exercise. What else? Ecological. We talk a lot about ecological. So our prepared MSP, or the Maritime Spatial Plan for Lithuania, it is not one map. We have there several maps. In general, they are, at the final stages, there are 5. So one of those are the one to ensure the ecological balance for our maritime waters. If we took all the developments into the sea, we have to be sure that ecology is not hampered somehow. If we are still keeping our ecological status in balance. So this was our one of the primary aims. Therefore, I'm showing this map first. As you can see here, we have this, our natural pattern, as I show you first slide, I mean, with those shallower areas, deeper zones, and also some slopes, which actually influences very much and very much defines what is the biological assets beneath this water column, because it all relates to the sun penetration, oxygen, some dynamics of the near bottom environment. So there is a lot of indications just available if you just put a bathymetry, for example, on the map. It's a lot of things that you can dig out from this type of thinking. Then, of course, we put some thinking which might help to keep this one of the MSP principles, meaning the continuity or the linkage of the most valuable ecological areas. So we have defined some areas of the most valuable for Natura protection sites development. So all this somehow fitted into the one map for ecological balance. Then another one is the reservation. So we reserve some space for the national and strategical aims. So you can see here the lines for the corridors for electricity, connection, power, whatsoever, gas, offshore wind energy. So we have grid system already somehow established. We have areas foreseen for the offshore wind energy development and other renewable energy sources. We have navigation routes, all as a reservation for the national strategical priorities. This is very important. So this reservation was also done. Then we have, of course, most important thing, because the planning is for the development, so we have developments also mapped here. There is a certain zoning. It's too complex, of course, map to introduce it within 20 seconds, but in general it contains, as you can see, several parts. So we have the regions identified, we have priorities identified, and we have identified some kind of a first, second, third level priorities for the certain areas in order for the developers, if they select one of those 7, as you can see here, 7 regions, which one is of favor or which one is most easier for them to start their developments at that particular zone. So this was kind of the exercise, activity, and the final result. So thank you very much for your attention.
Oh, thank you.
No response.
And could you stay for 1 or 2 questions? Do we have any questions? It was very detailed description, how you managed to get to the plan. So,
Anderson, Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management. Who was setting the planning targets, and how was this? I mean, what was who is going to use the plan in what aims, so to say? But the major issue, who was setting the planning targets?
Thank you for the question. Actually, as you can probably notice from the morning session, we sometimes say a lot about general strategical aims, some targets, some aims which we seek. But actually, it's more simple than that, much more simple than that. We simply got the terms of reference for our plan from the ministry, meaning that all ministries that have certain interest to maritime space developments, they list their own targets. And then it's up to the planner, and it's up to the experience of the planners, how they will introduce other unknown targets into the map. So it's a really very subjective work to be done, yes.
okay, here was a question as well.
Yes, thank you, Jan Schmidt-Borgkrona. Yes, I think it's you mentioned it very shortly that you worked with 2 alternatives in at a quite early stage, and I think it's very interesting that you did that in the whole scale of the planning, because it can contribute to opening up for discussions on what the future you want and which priorities you should have. So could you comment something on the use of the 2 alternatives?
Okay, thank you very much. For the using of alternatives, it was not completely our free will, because according to the planning system which exists today, we have to provide alternatives for the SEA study, because so it should be done like this. So in general, what we have done, yes, by following this natural pattern, yes, we have prepared two alternatives which do not differ too much, because the economical, natural, and social targets, they remain the same, so there is no big difference. Then it's up to the planner how you make the reallocation or the spatial game out of those nice prioritized areas. So you can provide certain concepts. So those were not completely different, they are very similar, I would say. Just you have to select which part to develop more. North, meaning close to Latvia, or south, closer to Russia. That's the only question.
Latvians were not so happy, actually,
You will be.
as outcome of this plan. But here is also one question.
Thank you very much for this very constructive or very practical presentation. I have two questions. One, I start with a bit provocative one. Your EEZ is very small, and have you thought about whether there are maybe areas more sensitive in ecological terms outside of your national area, and maybe it would make more sense protecting those? That's my first question. And the second one, since you stressed it so much that you neglected all the uncertainties, I think there's a big danger with using maps when you neglect all the uncertainties. I've seen examples where they asked several different experts and got 6 completely different maps of areas of high sensitivity.
Okay, thank you very much. So for me, the questions are very, very difficult, but for me it's very easy to answer because I am in kind of a good situation. Lithuania is small, as you mentioned. Yes, this triangle is small. For identifying the current users and assets, of course, natural and also resources, we took into account also the neighboring countries' data sets. So they were available for us also thanks to the previous European projects where we can collect all this type of data. So yes, we took this into account. It was mapped as well. You can see here only Lithuania part, but it was much, much, much wider. And for, if answering your question regarding the quality uncertainties, in Lithuania there was only one institution dealing with maritime issues, biological, physical, geological, whatsoever. And this institution was ours. So when we sit together with all experts involved, we can somehow easier exclude the uncertainties. So this was the easy job. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have to stop at this point. Thank you very much for very detailed answers.